Adam Arak says, how would you build a running back room if you were a GM? Would you pay up for a guy to take 75% of the snaps? Would you throw a few $1 million at a couple solid vets, draft one every year and let them walk in free agency? Any other strategies? I'm fascinated by how teams are approaching this after Saquon Barkley and other backs were opining about the shifting value of the position. I've talked about this 10,000 times over the last 5 years. I don't think I've ever talked to you about it. How would you build a running back room if you were a GM and you were in charge?
So mostly with late round draft picks and free agents, I think you want to get, 2 or 3 guys into the building every year and just see who plays well in the preseason and see who's got it. I would not take them in, the first 3 or 4 rounds. I'd wait till day 3 of the draft. You can sign a veteran every now and again. I think it might be specific on this coach had coached him before, or you notice, again, getting into inefficiencies. Maybe, this guy played for Chip Kelly in college, and so he's really good at, shotgun runs of a specific nature, and that's what your offense is leaning into, and you want to kind of meld those two ideas together. But to me, the way teams run into issues is when they draft guys high who then perform, you kind of get stuck having to give a guy a contract.
Yeah.
Both because of the expectation of what's to come and also because fans love running backs, and first and even second round running backs are exciting. Every year a team drafts the guys high, and fans love their first and second rounders, especially if they're running backs, and they get to see them make exciting plays every week. And so you get to Zeke, you get to Saquon, you get to these guys who maybe if they were sixth rounders with similar production would be okay taking the $6 to $8 million contract that I don't think is going to hurt anybody if you give out that kind of contract to a running back. But you can't do that because they were a first rounder or they were a second rounder and they've performed, close enough to the expectation and everyone's excited about them. And that's when the business side of football becomes hard, because you can't just draft a first round running back every 3 years and just keep letting them walk. I think that's, relatively bad business.
It's also bad culture, right? I mean, that's just going to be a rough situation in the building if a guy's playing well and you're just constantly shitting on them out the door every 3 or 4 years.
Right, because I still think players probably think running backs are more important than, analysts do or people who study it. And of course, they're your friends, so you want to see them get paid. And so, yeah, I think drafting a guy in the first round, kind of having this weird standoff. Do we pick up the 5th-year option? Do we franchise tag him? We got to play hardball. We're not going to pay him $16 a year. I just don't think that's really good for anybody. So if I was doing it, 5th, 6th, 7th rounder of choice, obviously bring in a couple free agents, and I would just prioritize either speed or competitive toughness. Because those are the things that you can't really change. You can't make a running back want contact in the NFL if he didn't want contact and was okay dishing it out in college. So I think that's a trait that's really, valuable to have in the building. And then, of course you can't coach speed, to a degree. So just getting guys like that in and seeing who adapts to the offense, who doesn't, I think most teams are able to, have a running back who stays on the roster. And even if it's in a special teams role for a year or two until he grows into a running back role, that's the way I would do it. Because again, when those guys, if they're playing really well and they're at the top of the rushing statistics and all that stuff, giving them top dollar maybe isn't quite as important for the running back himself, because he doesn't need the $16 million contract to validate what he's done. And just the fans don't have that expectation that this is our first rounder and I've loved him for so long. I'm just thinking about Pacheco with the Chiefs, eventually in 2 or 3 years, what happens if he keeps producing at the level that he does? But he's a 6th rounder. It wasn't you drafted Clyde and then Clyde was everything you hoped. And now the Chiefs are in the same spot that the Giants are with Saquon. So that's the way I do it.
If I look at the examples that I feel have worked out, it's a lot of guys who were drafted in the 2nd round based on traits. Right? Nick Chubb being the best example. I don't think the Nick Chubb contract is some massive mistake from the Browns side of it. It was 3 for $36 with $20 million guaranteed. And I think he's kind of the perfect example of he's in a really good situation, but every single metric tells you how much better he makes the Browns running game compared to what's actually there. There's no meat left on the bone because Nick Chubb is the running back for the Browns. So I think that's kind of the sweet spot for me, is if you draft a guy in the 2nd round that's kind of all explosion and he can be the centerpiece of your running game and really add to what he's not just getting what's there. And I know that's very hard. It's a tough needle to thread, but I would take a guy in the 2nd round if I felt like he was that sort of player. And then I would try to complement that with someone in the later rounds who is just a kind of dirty work guy, like what Samaje Perine was for the Bengals last year. Somebody who's really good in protection, who's solid as a pass protector, who I can just rely on in those sorts of situations. It's what the Bears did with Roshan Johnson this year. Like take a guy in the 4th round who can just be a very solid option in all of those kind of ancillary aspects of the offense and pair those two guys together. That's what I would try to do.
So my pushback would be, if you feel confident enough in yourself to draft the right guy in the 2nd round, why don't you feel confident enough to draft the right guy in the 1st round?
I think it's the 5th-year option element to it. Like having that for certain positions is more valuable than having it for others. So that's why I just don't think it's necessary for running backs.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I was just kind of going down the line of, are you overconfident in your ability to pick the 2nd rounder that's going to be valuable enough to make that a worthy pick?
I don't really have any data on that. This is all anecdotal. Like this is mostly just
No, I know. That's what I'm saying,
okay,
because this is your particular. You were saying if I identified the guy with the traits and the fit and all that stuff, and I was just kind of going down the GM role of, do you feel confident enough to actually trust that over, the general rule of thumb, which is
probably not.
we don't
If
really
I
know.
were doing this, I probably wouldn't draft them in the 2nd round. But I think that there are enough examples where I think, all right, I'm comfortable enough by doing that. I wouldn't say I would never draft one in the 2nd round. So here's my question for you, as somebody who's in the league and has had to think about these sorts of things, the players union, all that. How do you think other players would react if there was some sort of like financial program put in place to kind of prop up what's been happening to the running back position?
I think if you explained it in the right way, guys would be on board. You'd have to kind of make sure that it wasn't like you're taking less money or you're getting less money to give to these other guys when, theoretically they play football the same way you do and they're eligible for whatever contract. I think it's an interesting concept. I don't know the feasibility of it. I mean, I've tried
I
to
don't know
think through a
either, but
few.
I'm just trying to think of like what the solutions would be, because the trajectory we're on now just sucks. Like the knowing that it's probably best to just chew these guys up and spit them out, and how cold that feels. I just think that we should be thinking about potential creative solutions to kind of rectify that. I don't know what it looks like, but something like that, where there's just like, I don't know, a fund. Like there's some sort of like running
Yeah, I
back
mean,
pension
it gets
fund.
to like the player performance. I mean, we have that for guys who are on rookie contracts or guys who are on minimum contracts, where it's an inverse scale of what your cap number is and how much time you play, and then you get paid in accordance to, if you're basically playing more than your contract would make it seem like you should be playing. And that number's gone up in the last few years a lot with the new CBA. So there are guys making like five, six, $700,000. If you're on a rookie contract and you play the full season, you play 1,000 snaps, you're basically getting a second minimum contract coming your way. So I think that would probably be the model of it, because we already have evidence. But again, the player performance, I think, comes from ourselves. So we as the players union have decided, instead of paying ourselves in a traditional manner, making the salary cap higher and just letting the market run its course, we've decided to take, $4 million or $5 million, whatever that amount is, and pay ourselves and pay our lowest members, or our lowest, earning members who play the most, more money. So it would probably start down that road and just figuring out how the dollars work on that. But it is an interesting idea. And yeah, I mean, for how much punishment they take, for how, injured they get, and obviously $8 and $10 million is a lot of money per year, but it's all relative. And when it's compared to, Adrian Peterson making $12 million 12 years ago or whatever, and seeing how much more money other positions are making now and the running backs aren't, there's definitely something creative we can do to make sure that the guys who are producing get paid, and they don't have all their production on, the 2 or 3 years where they're making the absolute least and then they get screwed at the end of it.